November 12, 1942. The western desert of North Africa lay silent except for the faint rattle of distant gunfire and the whisper of the wind across endless sand. A small German reconnaissance unit had come across the remnants of a destroyed British supply column. Among the wreckage stood something unexpected: an intact American vehicle, abandoned by its crew. Standard Wehrmacht procedure dictated that captured enemy vehicles should be destroyed or left behind. But the unit's commanding officer hesitated. "Get our best mechanic," he ordered. "I want to know if we can use this thing." Within minutes, a team of Afrika Korps mechanics surrounded the vehicle. Its nameplate read Willys MB. The Americans called it a Jeep. What they discovered in the next half hour would challenge everything they believed about German engineering superiority. When they lifted the hood, the shock began. The Go Devil engine, a simple, robust 134 cubic inch machine producing about 60 horsepower, looked almost crude compared to German engines. Yet everything about it screamed efficiency. Color-coded wires, clearly labeled components, bolts and fittings that could be removed with basic tools. The entire engine bay was designed for accessibility, not prestige. For the senior mechanic, a man who had serviced German vehicles for 2 decades, this was a revelation. German machines were designed for precision, for performance. The Jeep was designed for function. Every part appeared standardized, interchangeable, built for rapid production and field repair. It was not a product of artisanship. It was a triumph of practicality. He turned to his commanding officer. "This vehicle is remarkable," he said quietly. "It's designed by someone who understands field conditions." The officer frowned. German engineering is the finest in the world. The mechanic didn't argue. Instead, he pointed to the 4-wheel drive lever. "Look here. One lever engages all 4 wheels. Ours require multiple operations, and most of our light vehicles don't even have 4-wheel drive." Indeed, the Volkswagen Kübelwagen, Germany's light transport vehicle designed by Ferdinand Porsche, was elegant and efficient on paper. It was lighter, more fuel-efficient, and used an air-cooled engine ideal for desert warfare. But it had one fatal flaw: rear-wheel drive only. In the sands of Africa, that made all the difference. When the mechanics tested the Jeep, they found it unstoppable. It powered through soft terrain that bogged down their own vehicles. Its suspension, simple leaf springs instead of torsion bars, looked crude but could be repaired anywhere. Its electrical and fuel systems were basic yet incredibly forgiving. Could run on almost any grade of fuel. The Jeep was not a marvel of precision engineering. It was a soldier's tool, built to endure ignorance, mud, heat, and abuse. Every feature served one goal: reliability under chaos. As the German mechanics worked, their admiration deepened. They realized the Jeep was built according to a completely different philosophy. While Germany chased technical excellence, America pursued mass effectiveness, building thousands of vehicles that could be operated by anyone, maintained anywhere, and replaced easily. By late 1942, that difference was already changing the course of the war. The United States had built over 200,000 Jeeps, while Germany had produced fewer than 20,000 Kübelwagens. The American vehicle was not just a machine, it was an industrial message. Standardization beats sophistication in total war. In the following days, the captured Jeep became a sensation within the unit. Officers borrowed it for reconnaissance runs, and soldiers queued for a chance to drive it. Mechanics studied every inch, sketching diagrams and writing reports to send up the chain of command. One German supply officer, who had worked in the automotive industry before the war, summed up what many were beginning to realize. "We build vehicles for perfection," he said. "The Americans build vehicles to be manufactured. In total war, that matters more." That statement would echo throughout the German ranks. It marked the first crack in the myth of technological invincibility that had defined the Wehrmacht. The captured Jeep showed that American success was not built on genius machines, but on systems, factories, logistics, and the ability to mobilize an entire economy toward one unified purpose. The Germans soon captured more Jeeps across Africa. Informal repair networks formed among mechanics, swapping parts and knowledge. A black market even developed, where a working Jeep could fetch more than its weight in gold. Soldiers began to prefer the rugged American machines to their own meticulously crafted vehicles. As one mechanic wrote in his report, "The Jeep is not perfect, but perfection does not win wars. Quantity, reliability, and simplicity do." That realization, born in the dust of North Africa, would outlast the war itself. The Jeep's arrival at the unit's forward camp became more than a test drive. It became an experiment in philosophy. The mechanics didn't just evaluate a machine. They were dissecting an idea. For 3 relentless days, they pushed the captured vehicle through sand, over rocks, and into terrain that crippled their Kübelwagens. The result was undeniable. The Jeep refused to fail. They overloaded it, buried it, and ran it hot under the desert sun. Its leaf spring suspension, primitive by German standards, flexed and endured. The Go-Devil 4-cylinder engine, rated at a modest 60 horsepower, lacked refinement but never stopped running. Everything about it looked simple, almost crude. But that simplicity was the secret. Every component could be replaced in the field. Every system could be understood without a manual. When the tests ended, the senior mechanic concluded, it was not built for elegance. It was built to survive. Word spread quickly. Officers began borrowing the Jeep for reconnaissance patrols, amazed by its ability to power through sand where their own vehicles bogged down. Soldiers gathered around as the mechanics opened panels and traced the wiring. They drafted reports filled with diagrams and measurements, realizing that this small American vehicle represented something much larger. A completely different way of thinking about machines. In Germany, vehicles were handcrafted for performance. In America, they were engineered for production. The numbers told the story. By the end of the war, the United States would produce over 640,000 Jeeps. Germany, by contrast, built roughly 50,000 Kübelwagens. The gap wasn't just numerical, it was philosophical. The Jeep was designed to be assembled by semi-skilled workers using standardized parts. Its value was in its repeatability. Germany prized precision craftsmanship. America prized scalability. A supply officer who had once worked in the German automotive industry described the revelation perfectly. "We build to achieve perfection. The Americans build so anyone can build." The difference extended beyond the factory floor. The Americans had structured their entire logistics network around interchangeability. Apart from a Jeep fit a truck or a half-track, the same bolts, filters, and spark plugs could be found across entire fleets. A mechanic who knew one vehicle could service them all. That kind of design thinking turned logistics into a weapon. German supply chains, by contrast, were a chaotic mix of models from dozens of manufacturers. A truck from Opel needed different parts than one from Mercedes. Vehicles captured from other countries added even more confusion. Spare parts were never where they were needed, and the result was paralysis in the field. When reports of American production reached German intelligence, disbelief turned to dread. Factories like Willow Run were assembling bombers at a rate of 1 per hour. Shipyards were launching Liberty ships in mere weeks. The same system that built the Jeep was building entire fleets and air forces. It wasn't that American machines were better, it was that American systems were unbeatable. As German troops surrendered in Tunisia in 1943, many mechanics found themselves inside Allied camps, surrounded by what they had once fought against. In the motor pools of these camps, they saw the philosophy that had defeated them in full motion. American mechanics, some barely out of their teens, maintained hundreds of vehicles with casual efficiency. Their manuals were simple, full of clear illustrations and color-coded diagrams. The workshop shelves overflowed with spare parts, and replacements arrived before anyone had to ask. When a vehicle broke beyond repair, it was stripped for parts and replaced within days. One American sergeant, noticing a German mechanic watching him work, explained with a grin, "We designed so a farm boy can fix it." That single sentence summarized the American advantage. The Jeep, the trucks, the bombers, all shared a design language of simplicity, modularity, and abundance. The goal wasn't perfection. It was availability. For the captured mechanics, it was an education. They learned that the American military treated every machine as part of a vast, standardized ecosystem. Nothing depended on genius. Everything depended on process. When these men later returned to Germany, they carried that lesson with them. They had seen an industrial machine where efficiency replaced pride and production replaced prestige. They realized that in total war, the side that could replace faster than the enemy could destroy would always win. The Jeep, that humble vehicle of stamped steel and coarse fittings, had proven the point more convincingly than any tank or bomber. It was proof that in modern war, systems beat specifications and functionality outweighs perfection. As the months passed in captivity, German mechanics working in American prison camps witnessed industrial efficiency that defied imagination. Motor pools at bases like Camp Hearn in Texas were operated with an ease that seemed almost mechanical in itself. Vehicles arrived for service, were repaired within hours, and returned to duty. There was no waiting for requisitions or struggling to source parts. Everything was available, organized, and standardized. One German mechanic noted in his report, "They repair with speed, not ceremony." He observed how American soldiers, most with little formal training, could rebuild an engine, change transmissions, or diagnose electrical faults using nothing more than a manual and a set of standard tools. The manuals themselves were written at a 6th grade reading level, filled with clear pictures rather than complex technical language. The reason this worked was simple. American manufacturing was built for ordinary people. Ford, Willis, and countless subcontractors had divided production into small, repeatable tasks. No single worker needed to understand the entire process. Each only had to perfect one step and repeat it thousands of times. This method, refined on automobile assembly lines, allowed unskilled labor to produce advanced machinery at unprecedented speed. The same approach applied to vehicle maintenance in the field. If a Jeep broke down, soldiers didn't panic. They replaced the broken part. If the repair didn't work, they tried another component. The parts were cheap, plentiful, and identical. The goal wasn't to restore factory perfection. It was to keep the machine moving. A Ford worker-turned-soldier once explained to a captured German, "Back home at Willow Run, we finished a bomber every hour. Not because we built fast, but because we built simple. Everyone does one thing right over and over." For the German mechanic, raised in a culture that prized individual craftsmanship and precision, this was almost heretical. But it was effective. America didn't just have more machines, it had a replicable system that made output inevitable. The deeper lesson emerged gradually. American vehicles shared common components across models. A bolt from a Jeep fit a truck. A filter for a generator fit a tank. This was more than clever engineering, it was logistical genius. It allowed an entire global military to function as a single mechanical organism. In contrast, Germany's forces were strangled by diversity. Their supply chains collapsed under the weight of incompatible systems. In 1943 alone, the United States produced over 2 million military vehicles, compared to Germany's total output of fewer than 100,000 of all types. The numbers were not abstract to the men who witnessed them. At American depots, endless rows of trucks and Jeeps waited for deployment. Convoys stretched for miles. On American highways, tanks rolled on transporters instead of wearing out their tracks on the road. Every corner of the country hummed with production. Germany, meanwhile, was grinding itself to exhaustion. By late 1943, 4 out of 5 German divisions were still dependent on horses for logistics. Over 2 million horses would die pulling wagons of fuel and ammunition that American trucks could have delivered in a fraction of the time. The Wehrmacht's engineering brilliance had been defeated by the simple arithmetic of mass production. Even within German high command, the realization was dawning. Reports from the front described captured American vehicles outperforming their own. Factories struggled to maintain output while Allied bombers destroyed transport lines. The sheer scale of American replacement capacity made each German victory hollow. When news of the Allied invasion of Normandy reached the prison camps in 1944, few of the captured mechanics were surprised. They had seen the machine that made it possible. The landing forces had arrived with thousands of vehicles, Jeep convoys, amphibious trucks, tanks, and landing craft, all produced faster than Germany could destroy them. One mechanic quietly remarked, "They have made industry a weapon." After the war, as prisoners were repatriated, the same men returned to a Germany in ruins. Cities lay flattened, railways destroyed, and factories silent. Yet among the rubble, they carried with them the lessons of their captors. Many found work in the new motor pools of the Allied occupation, maintaining American vehicles still rolling through German streets. For the first time, they were on the other side of the production philosophy, and they admired its practicality. When asked what kind of vehicle Germany should build next, one former Afrika Korps mechanic replied, "Something smaller than a Jeep, more efficient but built like it. Simple parts, easy repair, built for the worker, not the engineer." That idea became a seed for post-war recovery. The companies that had once built military vehicles, Volkswagen, Mercedes, Opel, began studying American methods. They applied mass production principles to civilian cars. The result was the Volkswagen Beetle, a car that embodied the union of American production philosophy and German mechanical discipline. Simple, reliable, inexpensive, and manufacturable by the hundreds of thousands. By the 1950s, West Germany had become a model of industrial rebirth. Its factories, rebuilt with help from the Marshall Plan, were turning out cars, trucks, and machinery that captured the world market. The combination of German precision and American scalability created something entirely new, a production culture that valued reliability and repeatability over perfection. The Jeep, once an enemy's machine, had become a silent teacher. It showed the power of design that prioritizes simplicity and abundance over elegance and scarcity. It proved that a good enough machine built 1,000,000 times beats a flawless one built 1,000. For the men who had examined that first captured Jeep in the desert, this realization marked the beginning of wisdom, a truth that would shape not just post-war Germany, but the industrial world for generations. When the war finally ended, Germany was a nation in ruins. Its cities had been reduced to rubble, its factories flattened, its population starving. Yet amid the devastation, one unlikely symbol of resilience rolled through the wreckage: the American Jeep. Allied officers used them to navigate shattered streets, deliver supplies, and oversee reconstruction. To the German mechanics who had once studied these vehicles in awe, the sight carried a strange familiarity. Many of those former Afrika Korps mechanics now worked for the occupying forces, maintaining the same Jeeps they had once considered enemy machines. The Allies needed skilled hands, and these men needed work. In those motor pools, half repair shop, half classroom, a quiet transfer of knowledge took place. German mechanics trained young apprentices using American manuals, applying the lessons they had learned in captivity: simplicity, standardization, and adaptability. One such mechanic, now employed by an Allied logistics unit, summed it up perfectly. "We learned that good design is not what engineers admire, but what soldiers understand." The American approach soon began influencing the rebirth of German industry. Under the Marshall Plan, new factories were built with efficiency in mind. Assembly lines replaced artisanal workshops. Engineers who once obsessed over tolerances now studied production flow and parts interchangeability. Companies like Volkswagen, which had produced the wartime Kübelwagen, turned to civilian markets with a new mindset: practical design for mass production. The result was the Volkswagen Beetle, the car that would symbolize Germany's post-war recovery. Its air-cooled engine and rounded body echoed pre-war ideas, but its manufacturing philosophy was unmistakably modern. It was simple, durable, and easy to produce, the very qualities that had made the Jeep legendary. Other manufacturers followed. Mercedes-Benz introduced streamlined assembly processes. BMW adopted component sharing across models. The fusion of German precision with American pragmatism transformed an economy once devoted to war into one devoted to efficiency and export. By the 1960s, former Wehrmacht mechanics attended reunions of the Afrika Korps. Old soldiers gathered to share memories of desert campaigns long past, but the talk often turned to machines. Inevitably, someone mentioned the Jeep. They spoke of its rugged frame, its forgiving engine, and how it had outlasted the sands of North Africa. One veteran admitted, "The day I first drove a Jeep, I realized we had already lost the war, not because of soldiers, but because of factories." Others agreed. They understood now that victory had not come from superior tactics or even bravery, but from industrial philosophy. The Americans had mastered the art of building enough of the right thing, fast enough to matter. The Jeep was not the most powerful vehicle, but it was the most available. It embodied a truth that every German engineer eventually came to accept. Perfection is useless if it cannot be produced in quantity. In the decades that followed, that philosophy spread worldwide. Nations rebuilt their industries following the same logic. Standard parts, simplified designs, and modular production became the foundation of modern manufacturing. Even in civilian life, the principles born from the Jeep's design, interchangeability, accessibility, reliability, shaped everything from automobiles to home appliances. Historians later called the Jeep America's greatest contribution to modern warfare. Not because it was the most advanced, but because it represented a mindset that functionality and simplicity could be more powerful than sophistication and elegance. The German officers who once dismissed it as crude came to see it as an engineering masterpiece in its own right, precisely because it stripped away everything unnecessary. By the time the last Afrika Korps reunion was held in the late 1990s, only a handful of veterans remained. A local museum displayed a restored Willys MB Jeep, painted olive drab and still bearing the faded white star. The old men stood around it in silence. One reached out, running a trembling hand over the hood. "We never had vehicles like this," he said softly. "Not with this reliability, not in these numbers. We built for perfection. They built for production." The others nodded. They had long since understood that the war had been decided not only on battlefields, but in factories and motor pools, in the minds of engineers who valued results over refinement. The Jeep had taught them that lesson. It had been more than a vehicle. It was a teacher, a symbol of humility, and a blueprint for rebuilding. The same mechanics who once examined it as prisoners had helped rebuild Germany's future, one practical bolt at a time. The story of the captured Jeep was, in the end, a story of transformation, from arrogance to understanding, from defeat to renewal. What began in the deserts of North Africa became a foundation for an entire nation's rebirth.